There was a king in ancient India who had a big problem. The king's daughter was getting married soon, but they couldn't find a suitable match for her. You see, the king had only one daughter. He loved her more than anything in the world, and he wanted the best for her, so he refused all marriage proposals that came their way. The king decided to host a kingdom-wide competition where all eligible bachelors were invited to participate. The winner would marry his daughter and become the next king of the kingdom. On the day of the competition, many young men showed up. There were princes from neighboring kingdoms, as well as commoners. There were athletes, poets, and warriors. But there was one type of man who was missing, the intellectual type. You know, the kind of guy who studies hard, gets good grades, but can't really do much beyond that. The king wanted an intellectual to be his son-in-law because he knew that his daughter was an intellectual herself. They had countless hours of deep conversations together about life, the universe, and everything. The king hoped that his son-in-law would be able to keep up with his daughter intellectually. The competition went on for days. The princes showed off their wealth and power. The warriors showed off their strength and skills. And the athletes showed off their speed and endurance. But none of them could impress the king. Just when the king was about to give up hope, a young man approached him and said, "My king, I want to participate in the competition." The king looked at him and saw that he was just a commoner. He didn't have any wealth, power, or influence. So the king allowed him to compete, thinking that he would be an easy win for the others. As it turned out, the young man was smarter than everyone expected. He won every round of the competition, and the king was amazed. At last, the king had found the perfect match for his daughter. But there was one thing that bothered him. The young man was just a commoner. He didn't have any money or status, and the king knew that his daughter would need someone who could protect her and provide for her. So the king made a deal with the young man. If he agreed to marry his daughter, he would make him the next king of the kingdom. The young man was overjoyed. He had won the heart of the king's daughter, and now he would be the king of the kingdom. But before they could celebrate, the king's advisor stepped in and said, "My king, are you sure you want to do this? This young man is just a commoner. He doesn't know how to rule a kingdom. He doesn't have any experience or qualifications. I'm afraid he will ruin our kingdom." The king thought about what his advisor said, and he wasn't sure if he was making the right decision. You see, the king had always dreamed of a grand wedding for his daughter. He wanted to give her the best start in life possible, and he knew that marrying a commoner wouldn't give her the life she deserved. On the other hand, he couldn't bear the thought of his daughter being unhappy. He had seen how in love she was with this young man, and he knew that if he forced her to marry someone else, she would never forgive him. So the king decided to give the young man a chance. He would let him marry his daughter, but only if he passed a test. The test was simple. The king gave him one small seed and told him to bring back a huge tree by the next morning. If he succeeded, he would marry his daughter and become the next king. If he failed, he would be banished from the kingdom and never see his daughter again. The young man took the seed and left the kingdom. He walked for days until he found a wise hermit. He explained his situation and asked the hermit to help him. The hermit saw the determination in the young man's eyes and agreed to help him. He took the seed and planted it in the ground, then drew a circle around it. He told the young man to come back in 12 months and not step outside the circle. The young man waited patiently for 12 months. Then he couldn't wait any longer. He stepped outside the circle and saw that a huge tree had grown from the seed. It was so tall that its branches touched the sky. The hermit was impressed by the young man's patience and his ability to wait for such a long time. He gave him a magical fruit and told him to take it back to the king. The fruit would make the king's daughter fall in love with him even more. When the young man returned to the kingdom, the king was furious. He had seen the determination in the young man's eyes when he first came to him, and he had hoped that he would succeed, but he had failed. The king was about to banish him when the young man handed him the fruit. The king took the fruit and ate it, and in a flash, he saw the love in his daughter's eyes. He realized that he had been wrong to judge the young man. He had seen the love between them, and he should have known that they were meant to be together. The king apologized to the young man and allowed him to marry his daughter. They had a grand wedding, and the whole kingdom celebrated. The young man became the next king, and he and his wife ruled the kingdom wisely and fairly. Now, some people might think that this story is just a fairy tale, but I believe there is a deeper meaning to it. You see, the young man in this story represents anyone who is trying to achieve something great. He is the underdog who has to go up against the best of the best and win. He is the one who has to prove himself to the world. But here's the thing, the young man doesn't know how to read or write. He didn't have access to the same education as the other competitors. So how did he win the competition? How did he become the king? The answer is simple. He had a growth mindset. You see, the young man believed that he could improve himself no matter what his starting point was. He didn't let his circumstances define him. He didn't use his lack of education as an excuse to fail. Instead, he focused on what he did have, his intelligence, and he used it to win the competition. He didn't know how to read or write, but he was smart enough to figure out how to beat the other competitors. That's what makes him such a powerful role model. If he can do it, so can you. Don't let your circumstances define you. Don't let anyone tell you that you're not good enough. You are the sum of your efforts, not your circumstances. If you have a growth mindset and work hard, you can achieve anything you set your mind to. The young man in this story didn't know how to read or write, but he was still able to win the competition and become the king. He was able to do it because he had a growth mindset. He didn't let his circumstances define him. He didn't use his lack of education as an excuse to fail. Instead, he focused on what he did have, his intelligence, and he used it to win the competition. So never give up on yourself, no matter how difficult things may seem. Never let anyone tell you that you're not good enough. With hard work and dedication, you can achieve anything you set your mind to. The young man in this story is the perfect example of that. He didn't have any money, power, or influence, but he didn't let that stop him from winning the heart of the king's daughter and becoming the next king. This story teaches us that we should never underestimate anyone. We don't know what kind of potential they may have. The young man may have been just a commoner, but he had something the others didn't have, a growth mindset. He was able to grow and change and become whoever he wanted to be. That's why I love this story so much. It gives me hope that no matter how difficult things may seem, if you just keep moving forward, you will eventually get to where you want to be. I hope this story has inspired you to never give up on yourself. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.